All right, I apologize for that glitch there. For whatever reason, my earbuds just connected, so I had a brief moment there. My name is Max. I'm a person in recovery, and I thank you for asking me to speak tonight. And those of you who handle security stuff, I personally really appreciate that because tech stuff scares me, and that whole thing that the quickness with which you shut down some of that stuff is I really appreciate that people are on top of that. I personally uh, that would stress me out quite a bit. Um, my sobriety date is uh, March 11th, 2006. Um, it was not my first sobriety date. Ironically, my first sobriety date just recently passed up. Um, and it was an interesting day. It was an interesting weekend. We'll get to that in a minute. I started drinking at a really young age. I started drinking when I was like 11, and I hear a lot of alcoholics talk about how uh, they always felt different and apart from everybody around them, and that they took their first drink and it was this magical experience, and that really wasn't the case. I have an older brother, and he had a number of people that he looked up to, and he was emulating their behavior. And I followed his suit. And as I watched him doing certain things, I did certain things when I was in the sixth grade. I had a classmate who was new in school. His parents were Europeans. Europeans have different attitudes about young people drinking. They both worked. And so after school, we'd go to his house and raid his dad's liquor cabinet and drink quite a bit. Um, Drugs got involved early on, and by the time I got to high school, it was all about during the week. It was about finding ways to get high, and on the weekends, finding ways to acquire alcohol and get drunk. And my mission in life from the day, from the moment I woke up until the moment I went to sleep, was to acquire and just be loaded the whole time. And even at a young age, I could tell there was something a bit off about what I was doing. I didn't realize how off things were until I had a little bit of time. I had a few years, and I was walking through this park with a friend, and there was this group having soccer practice, and these kids were like 10, 11, 12 years old. And I was watching this, and it occurred to me that my life at 10, 11, 12 years old looked significantly different from what I was seeing. And when I was that age, I would look to people like that and judge them and look down on them. And there are certain things about that when I looked back, and it was just like, wow, there's certain things about growing up that I just completely missed out on. Um, and and that's okay.
Even at a young age, even in high school, it was a period of time where I was like, I can't keep doing this, and things that I was doing and what was going on, and it's like tomorrow's going to be different. Tomorrow was never. Um, Junior year of high school,
Here in high school, I picked up a DUI. I wrecked my car, and I utilized that as an opportunity to distance myself from my friends. Um, and some of my friends didn't like it, and others were, hey, you got to do what you got to do. And it was the first time I was like, okay, great. I'm going to not do the things I'm doing. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to do any drugs, and everything will work out just fine. And even before the end of high school, I was like thinking, okay, I can drink again, but as long as I don't do any drugs, and that establishes my pattern. I drink, I drink heavily. I start leading a lifestyle where uh, my standards get blurred. I start doing things I ordinarily wouldn't do, and eventually I start drinking and partying the way that I want to. And it gets to the point where I'm like, how did I get here again? I picked up a second DUI in 2001, and because of the nature of the way that I was underage when the first one happened, that got sealed when I turned 18, and so I ended up getting sent to this first time DUI class, the first offenders. And there was this guy who was the counselor there. He was picking people out of the crowd and grilling them on their stories. And he knew how to pick them. He picked some people with intricate webs of denial and some elaborate stories and these rationalizations about how the DUI wasn't their fault. And he would explain to them that they need to reevaluate their relationship with alcohol. And I was like impressed about how he would pick these people, but he didn't take the opportunity to do that himself. Um, 2002, 2003, things like really escalated. I was diligent about what I was doing while I was on probation for that DUI. But the minute the probation was up, I would push it a little bit, I got involved with this punk rock band in 2002, and things just kind of escalated from there. 2004 was ugly. 2005, I had a coworker that had fled from Oklahoma and ended up homeless on the streets of Santa Cruz. And she ended up living at a living rehab on the west side. And she ended up working with us, and we were prepared. She got paired up with me, and she was telling me that these things that she was doing, how she would write some things down, and she was afraid of what she might find. And later in the summer of 2005, she was calling back Oklahoma and talking to people that she had interacted with over her lifetime. And what happened was I picked up my third DUI in September of 2005. Like I said, my first certain date. I just recently passed out. And real quick, I ended up in an AA meeting less than a week later, and they said, "Are there any newcomers in their first 30 days?" And I just had this gnawing feeling that if I didn't stand up at that moment, I probably would never hold myself accountable for my own recovery. And it was very strange. It was a room of about 18 people. It was in the basement of a church. They were doing this book study meeting, and I had no idea what was going on. But the fortunate thing that happened was that after the meeting, there were several people that talked to me, and that particular group had these envelopes that they would hand out to newcomers, and there would be a pamphlet and a copy of the Grapevine, and one of the things they had in there was the hard copy printed schedule of everything in the county. And I found something that was closer to my house that wasn't in the church, but I felt a lot more comfortable about that. But the thing about that was that when they read the steps and I could see the steps printed on a large sheet on the wall, it was like, oh, this is what that girl from Oklahoma was doing. And I didn't have any questions about that. I just assumed that this was what people were supposed to do. I watched it happen for somebody. They showed up. They ended up homeless on the streets of Oklahoma. They did this thing. It was this list of things to do. They did the list of things, and I watched things work out for her. Like eventually find out that what she was writing was up on the fourth step, and the phone calls she was making was directly related to her ninth step. And I just assumed that that's just what everybody did. I didn't know you could just kind of hang out, check things out. I thought there would be some group of people, some kind of oversight committee, that if I weren't doing something for my recovery, they pull me aside and say, "You got to go. You're wasting my time." I really believe that. I got a sponsor right away. It didn't stick right away. I got about 2 weeks in, and I heard somebody say the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. So I went home and smoked meth. I picked up a 30-day chip. I had maybe 3 days. I picked up a 60-day chip, maybe a week. I might have been high when I picked up a 90-day chip. I mean, this went on for a while. I was working steps. I was in service. I was working with a sponsor. I was smiling, nodding, and the type of stuff I was putting into my step work was very superficial. I would write things out, and I would say, "Hey, this is my part of these things." And my sponsor would add things like, "Oh yeah, unreasonable expectations, no lack of accountability, adopting accountability." These things that are still things that appear in my voice today. At a certain point, there were a number of people at meetings I went to that I respected and looked up to, and several of them had taken a personal interest in my recovery, and I would pay close attention to the things that they were saying. And the thing about the lack of accountability and unreasonable expectations of others, it basically amounts to blame. I would always blame somebody else or something else for the situation that I was in. And I heard this guy in a meeting say, "Hey, if the problem is somebody else, I'm screwed. I can't do anything about that. But if the problem is me, there's something I can do about that." And I said, And he was also the person that told me that if you want something that you've never had, you have to do something that you've never done. And these ideas, among other ideas that I would hear, kind of changed the perspective of what I was putting into my step work. And I would start to look at myself in a way that was different, instead of trying to satisfy my sponsor or finish the assignment or do the assignment well. I was actually looking, using this process to find the things within myself that I needed to change. When it came to the theological aspects of the program, I've pretty much always been an atheist. My family's Catholic, my extended family is Catholic. I am the only person in my entire extended family who is not a confirmed Catholic. That was time to, excuse me, it got time for that. And I was like, this isn't for me. And it upset my family at the time, but it was just something I was just like, none of this is my own spiritual truth. And I was fortunate enough that around here there aren't very many people, or at least at the time, there weren't very many people who cared. There was one guy who was like, what do you think about all this? And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And he's like, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, it's all this stuff with God. And he didn't say, well, you could use this as your higher power. You could use that as your higher power. He asked me questions about what my ideas were and what my values were and what my philosophies were. And he says, you know what, you'll do fine. When they talk about God, don't worry about that. Just go with what seems right to you. I'm like, okay. And over the years, I paid close attention to some of those ideas, and a lot of what we hear in mainstream meetings is tough for many of us to get by with, and much of that is because, like, mainstream culture in general, not just in 12-step groups, mainstream culture is uncomfortable with people not believing in God, and you know, it's just kind of a fact. And in 12-step groups, the odd thing about that is that people want you to have definite answers about step 11 questions before you even start answering, before you even start with step 2. And I find that idea strange. I really do. What I've come to find is that the steps are about achieving change, and they give us this format by which to do that. I've done steps a number of times with a number of different sponsors. Most of them, well, all of them, they were all really clear on what my ideas about God were, and some of them were uncomfortable with that and did not voice that. My second sponsor was very clear about his religious ideals, but he didn't interact with me in a way that showed me that he judged me. He interacted with me in a way that showed me that this was right for him. And I respect that, and I didn't question anything about that. At a certain point, like I said, it's like I get in 2005, and the drugs were kind of a problem. And at a certain point, I got a silver state silver, but I was still claiming that first date. And I had a couple of years when I stepped away for a couple of years straight with the sponsor and then my close friends and then the people around me. And the interesting thing that I found was that what I was told was like, hey, tell a couple of close friends and everybody who's close to you, and then out yourself at group level. And when I was telling close friends, it was like, hey, we're just glad you're here. We don't really care what happened then. We're just glad that this has worked out pretty well for you. when I hear people like introducing themselves, like say, "Oh, hey, I had a relapse. Oh, hey, this happened. I had to reset my time." It's like I admire that, but I respect that because there's a level of strength and courage demonstrated that I was unable to achieve at the time that those things were happening. I was too ashamed of the things that I was doing to discuss those things publicly. Um, and through the process of that, I found like full honesty with myself about the things that I need to change and the things that I need to look at, and full honesty with other people is the only way I'm going to get any kind of help. There's plenty of people with plenty of ideas that work really well for them. And if I think that it might work well for me, then I'm willing to give it a shot. There's a lot of people that have ideas and methods that I don't care for. But you know, over the years, I've learned to be okay with that because I know that their methods work really well for them, and they're going to continue to work really well for other people. So I don't have to judge that. I just have to do my best to find out what it is I need today, based on what it is I've learned in the past, and do what I can to help other people around me. There have been times in my recovery where it's like I didn't like AA, I didn't like certain people, I didn't like certain meetings. And what happened for me was I was so habituated in showing up to certain meetings, showing up for my service commitments, that I just continued to just do the things I was told, even though I didn't want to. Basically, I kept one foot in the door, even though I wanted to turn my back on AA in general. And you know, when drinking sounded like a good idea, somehow I didn't. Um, in general, it's like if I can give somebody some level of comfort and some idea that this might work for them, cool. Remember, there was a point in my early recovery when I was still kind of not sober, and I would hear all these people talk about how wonderful things were, how happy they were, how amazing their life was. Now I just wasn't feeling it. And I saw this guy with a couple of years in this meeting, and it was a casual meeting. The format was really loose. He was talking about how stressed out he was and how much anxiety he was experiencing over the things that were going on in his life. And what I saw was somebody who had a couple of years, he was counting sobriety time in years, and he wasn't feeling it. And I was like, oh, this might work for me. If this guy can feel this way and still stay sober, then this might actually work for me. It was the first time I felt hope. And it was because of the fact that at that moment he basically gave me permission to be human. I didn't have to achieve this level of perfection that I was perceiving that other people were trying to convey. And you know, there are times where it's just like, hey Max, how are you doing? I'd be lying if I said I was okay. Now I'm in a position where I have to talk about the things that are going on. These days, I don't do the things that I did in my early days. I don't go to meetings every day. I don't have as many commitments as I did for a number of years. But I found that there's the things that I do work pretty well for me. And I mean, keep doing it as long as I can. Thank you very much for allowing me the time to share, and I'll turn it over to you.